arguments next.
Points, right? You can't tell this newly sat jury of 12 that you didn't see what you saw on that tape, that horrific, traumatic, violent tape of Sean Combs violently attacking Cassie Ventura. So I think the defense was smart to say, hey, if we were here for domestic violence, we wouldn't be here. He absolutely committed that act. He did some horrible things. He might even be perceived by many of you as a bad person, but it's not against the law to be a bad person. My client is not being charged with domestic violence in this particular matter. Thus, this is a not guilty verdict. That's their argument.
But do you think it's problematic they admitted basically that?
No, I think they had to, Eva. I think, preserving credibility is going to be so key for both the prosecution and defense, right? So they had to try to earn some level of truth-telling points, if you will, with this jury. And I think they were able to do that by admitting the very, very obvious things we know so far.
Okay. So, Brian, as a defense attorney, obviously they're going to be trying to poke holes in the prosecution's case. Do you think they're going to lean into that?
I think that's the case. As Ebony laid out, you have to admit to some degree to garner credibility. You can't go and look at that video and be like, well, that's AI. That's not really our client doing that. And I think there's a strength in saying he is guilty of some things, but he's not guilty of anything. And I think Tenny Garagos, the defense attorney who did the opening statement, a very well-reasoned, well-argued opening statement, said it's not about whether or not he's a bad person. It's whether or not the government or the prosecution has proven their case. And these are the allegations. These are the charges. These are the elements. And juxtaposing and saying this is domestic violence. This isn't coercion. Going to the heart of what sex trafficking and racketeering is. Saying it's not this. It's this. This is what he's charged with. Not this. Not guilty. I think it was the only argument that could be made.
Okay, the name of the show is called Burden of Proof, Ebony. So what is the burden here?
Yeah, it's a clear and very, very difficult one, actually, if you're the prosecution. They have to prove beyond any reasonable doubt, keyword, there is a reasonable doubt, that Sean Combs is guilty of everything Brian laid out, from the racketeering, the coercion, the sex trafficking, and all of it. And, you know, they're going to have a lot of elements to meet. And again, the more the defense can convince that this is one private citizen's sexual proclivities that may be out of bounds to us, you and I, common man and woman, but this is within his legal right and it's not against the law to have these sexual preferences. The more they can make that, the prosecution is further and further from their burden of proof. But if, as also Brian said, the prosecution can successfully land the plane of connecting dots, right, between sexual assaultive behavior, physically abusive behavior, and individuals, that's going to be key, right? Other individuals working in connection and in collaboration with Sean Combs to execute that under coercive measures, that is how you get to guilty.
Ebony K. Williams, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you both so much.
Sad that this stuff goes on in the Black and Hispanic community, but when you're in positions of authority, positions of power, and you get clouded by money and fame, and you know there's people behind the scenes that want to control the masses, these are the positions that you'll be put in. You know, later on during the trial, you'll see that there's a much greater and darker, you know, scheme going on behind Diddy being arrested for female trafficking, sex trafficking, or whatever you want to call it. But more developments to be up sooner rather than later. This Yashala, this is Boots on the Ground. Shalom.